Pitcairn Island rises sharply from the South Pacific, a small volcanic mass surrounded by deep, turquoise waters. Its cliffs drop abruptly into the ocean, while hidden coves and reefs break the waves along the shoreline. Dense vegetation covers the interior slopes, thick ferns, pandanus trees, and scattered groves of fruit-bearing plants. The island is uninhabited, save for the occasional seabird or nesting turtle. The air carries salt and moisture, and winds sweep across the ridges, bending shrubs and sending whitecaps across the surrounding sea. Sounds are limited to the ocean, the rustling leaves, and distant bird calls. Isolation is immediate and absolute. Any human presence would be evident from miles offshore, yet the island remains untouched, offering concealment for those who would seek it. In 1790, a group of men from HMS Bounty arrived on Pitcairn Island after the infamous mutiny against Captain William Bligh. The mutineers, numbering a dozen or more, were joined by a few Tahitian men and women who had accompanied them. They were sailors by trade, accustomed to life at sea, disciplined in navigation and shipboard tasks, but unprepared for prolonged isolation on a rugged, uninhabited island. The group sought refuge from British naval pursuit, knowing capture would mean death or imprisonment. Pitcairn's remoteness offered the perfect concealment. Yet it also presented the challenge of total self-reliance. Their journey to the island was treacherous. Navigating open Pacific waters in small longboats required skill, courage, and knowledge of currents, tides, and winds. The decision to settle on Pitcairn was deliberate. Its hidden bays and steep cliffs made discovery unlikely, while the interior promised basic sustenance. The mutineers' skills included fishing, basic carpentry, and rudimentary gardening. But the dense forests and volcanic terrain required adaptation. Their Tahitian companions brought knowledge of tropical plants, which proved crucial for identifying edible fruits and roots. Upon landing, the group quickly assessed potential shelters and freshwater sources. They understood that survival depended on cooperation, resource management, and establishing a routine. Every decision carried weight, choosing where to settle, which plants to cultivate, and how to organize daily duties. There was no external authority, no immediate threat from humans, only the environment and the need for careful adaptation. Once the mutineers landed on Pitcairn, the reality of complete isolation set in. The island was distant from any regular shipping lanes, and the nearest European settlements were hundreds of miles away. Escape or communication with the outside world was impossible. The men and their Tahitian companions understood that survival would rely entirely on their own labor, skills, and cooperation. The island's interior was rugged and volcanic, with steep slopes and dense vegetation. Establishing shelter required clearing land, selecting sites near fresh water, and using available timber and natural resources. Food sources were limited to native birds, fish, and fruits, as well as crops they could cultivate over time. Every day required planning and effort, gathering firewood, securing safe drinking water, and maintaining basic shelters. With no ships passing, no messages arriving, and no hope of immediate rescue, the mutineers' isolation was total. The transition from seafarers to permanent island settlers began, marking the point where survival became a matter of endurance, routine, and adaptation. The mutineers quickly realized that the key to enduring Pitcairn's isolation lay in creating a structured routine. Their days became measured by the rising and setting of the sun, the tides along the shore, and the rhythm of the island's weather. Shelter was the first priority. Using timber from fallen trees and salvaged materials from the Bounty's launch boats, they constructed simple huts. Roofs were thatched with palm leaves, walls reinforced with stout branches, and interiors lined with mats or leaves for insulation against the damp nights. Sites were chosen near streams, ensuring access to fresh water, while elevated areas helped avoid flooding during heavy rains. Food remained a constant challenge. Fishing along the rocky coastline provided consistent protein, though tides and swells made it unpredictable. The mutineers used handmade spears and nets to catch fish, while some ventured inland to hunt native birds and collect eggs. Tahitian companions contributed knowledge of edible plants and cultivation, teaching the men to recognize fruits, roots, and vegetables suitable for consumption. Over time, small plots were cleared for crops, such as yams and bananas, offering a modest but steady supplement. Fire became the cornerstone of survival. Maintaining warmth, cooking meals, and signaling required constant vigilance. Groups rotated duties to ensure that embers never died overnight, and larger fires were built during colder months. Even small sparks were precious, a vital lifeline. Against hypothermia and damp conditions, discipline and routine extended beyond the physical. Social order was established to prevent conflicts from escalating. Roles were divided, some focused on constructing shelters, others on food gathering, while a few maintained tools, repaired clothing, or monitored the coastline for any signs of passing ships. Routine provided purpose and a psychological anchor. Men tracked days by natural events, the migration of seabirds, the flowering of plants, and the phases of the moon. These rhythms offered subtle markers of time, reinforcing a sense of order amidst total isolation. Adaptation was gradual, but steady. The survivors learned which areas of the island offered protection from wind and rain, which birds were easiest to catch, and which fruits were reliable sources of sustenance. Mistakes slipping on volcanic rocks or misjudging tides were costly reminders of the island's dangers. Over months, the group's coordination, knowledge, and practical skills increased, stabilizing life under conditions that would have overwhelmed unprepared individuals. By relying on routine, observation, and careful planning, the Bounty mutineers and their companions transformed Pitcairn from an unknown, unforgiving environment into a workable, if precarious, home. Survival became less a matter of luck and more a disciplined response to each day's demands. Even with routines established, Pitcairn Island remained an uncompromising environment. Limited resources ensured that scarcity was always a concern. Fishing trips sometimes returned empty-handed. Storms destroyed small shelters, and food stores dwindled faster than expected. Illness and injury claimed attention, minor cuts or scratches became dangerous without proper treatment, and occasional fevers spread among the group. Harsh weather compounded these vulnerabilities, leaving the survivors cold, damp, and exhausted. Tensions occasionally arose over food distribution, shelter, allocation, or leadership decisions. Disagreements, though restrained, carried the weight of survival, and a single conflict could disrupt cohesion. The Tahitian companions, while invaluable for knowledge of local resources, also navigated cultural differences, further challenging. Unity, mental strain was persistent. Days and nights blurred as monotony and isolation compressed time, creating a subtle but constant pressure on morale. Deaths occurred quietly. Individuals weakened by malnutrition, exposure, or illness succumbed without ceremony. Bodies were interred near shelters or along the shore, reminders of the environment's indifference. Each loss reshaped routines, responsibilities were redistributed, and grief was absorbed with practical efficiency rather than overt mourning. Despite these hardships, the group pressed on. Survival was maintained through relentless adaptation, observation, and adherence to discipline. Yet the fragility of their existence was clear. A single failed hunt, a sudden storm, or a lapse in vigilance could prove fatal. The isolation of Pitcairn Island imposed limits on human endurance, testing the mutineers and companions' physical and psychological capacity to the extreme. After years of isolation, the survivors of the Bounty mutiny on Pitcairn Island reached a state of cautious equilibrium. There was no sudden rescue, no dramatic intervention. Instead, the group's endurance culminated in the quiet, sustained ability to maintain shelter, secure food, and protect one another from environmental hazards. Fires burned steadily. Small gardens and foraged foods supplemented occasional hunting, and fishing and shelters, though rudimentary, provided relative security against frequent rain and wind. The passage of time became the measure of success. Children were born and raised within this isolated community, their survival dependent on the careful knowledge of the land and sea imparted by the adults. Skills honed from necessity: fishing, foraging, constructing windproof shelters ensured the community's continuity. Social structures, informal and adaptive, emerged to manage resources, assign tasks, and maintain cohesion. When the first passing ship arrived years later, the islanders were discovered largely healthy, though their appearance bore the marks of prolonged exposure. Weathered skin, coarse hair, and clothing fashioned from natural and salvaged materials. There was no ceremony upon discovery, only practical verification of identity and confirmation of their survival. The Bounty mutineers and their companions had endured not through heroics, but through discipline, observation, and continuous adaptation, leaving the island behind without spectacle. Their quiet resilience record in history. The story of the Bounty mutineers on Pitcairn Island remains a study in human endurance. Under extreme isolation, their survival was shaped not by luck or heroism, but by careful observation, disciplined routine, and adaptive problem-solving. Generations were sustained through knowledge of the land, resource management, and cooperation. The island itself remained unchanged, indifferent to human struggle, a silent witness to endurance and mortality. Historical records preserve the quiet significance of their experience. Survival was measured in sustained life, not trauma. The community's existence highlights the fragile balance between humanity and environment, leaving a contemplative silence over their months and years of isolation.